All right, so let's begin our discussion of the whole business of the prototype pattern and object copying by building a very small scenario. Now, I'm going to be building other scenarios in later sessions, but let's suppose that we have a class. Trying to get a class in here, a class called person, and this person is going to have an address and let's say a bunch of names. So I'm going to have a string array of names like so. I'm going to keep using public fields since it's easier to understand, and I'm going to have an address. So we'll have address like so, and that's going to be a new type that I will create. So that's going to be another class. Let's make it public. Doesn't really matter though. Okay, so address itself is going to be composed of two things. There's going to be a street name, and there's going to be a house number. There we go. So both of these are going to be public since we're using public fields. And I'm going to generate a bunch of constructors and other things so that we can print these objects to the console. So let's do ctrf here to make the constructor. Let's do the same here. ctrf like so. And then I'm going to generate the formatting member. So I will generate toString, just outputting the street name and house number here. And for the person, the toString is going to be a bit trickier. So I'm going to generate the formatting members, but then I will take the array of names and I will do string.join in it. Join it with a space. There we go. So that's going to take all the names and join them with a space. Okay, so we're now ready to start working with these objects. So for example, we can make an object of type person. All right, so let's go var John equals new person, and then I have to specify the name. So that's going to be a new array with John and Smith, for example. And then the second argument is the address. So I'll make a new address, which will specify the road as well as the house number 123. So this is a person that we can print. So I can write line John, and that should hopefully give us decent output to work with as we continue exploring this example. So here is the output. The names are John and Smith, and the address is empty. Well, actually it's not empty. We have specified the address. So the street name is London Road and the house number is 123. I was just confused by the lack of info here, but that's the nesting for you. Okay, so we have this set up. Now let's suppose that we also have somebody else maybe living at this address. Maybe we just want to copy John and change a particular part of it. So let's take a look at the obvious stuff that will not work. Like for example, let's suppose you want to make Jane. So you say var Jane equals John, and you think that by changing Jane you will make a new person. So for example, you say Jane.names at 0 equals Jane, and then you try to print Jane. Now this is doomed to failure for obvious reasons, because all you've done is you've copied the reference. So now you've modified that same reference and you're getting Jane in both of these locations. So this is obviously not the correct way to go. You have to do better than that. And the question is, well, how do we copy objects generally? I mean, is there like a common interface for us to specify this process of copying? And in actual fact, there might have been an interface at some point, and that interface is called ICloneable. So the idea is that the .NET framework has this interface called ICloneable, and we can try using it. ICloneable. There we go. Now, if you go ahead and you sort of study the documentation for ICloneable, then it says supports cloning, which creates a new instance of a class with the same value as an existing instance. Now, the problem with cloning things is you never know whether it's deep cloning or shallow cloning. And by deep cloning, we mean copying all the inset fields recursively, or just copying their references. Like for example, when you copy an address, do you copy the addresses insides, or do you just copy the reference? This is one of the things that is not specified in the ICloneable interface. So for example, you might go ahead and implement the ICloneable interface. There's actually just a single method called clone, and notice it returns an object, which is very inconvenient because I think ICloneable came in before we even had generics. So what you have to do is you have to make a copy of, in this case, person, and we don't know how. We don't know how this is meant to be done. Is it meant to be a shallow copy? And by shallow copy, we mean simply returning a new person that takes the copy of the names and the address, like so. So I put names and address like so. Now, obviously, if I do this, then we're not really fixing the problem. If I implement this kind of copying, then what happens is if I say varjane equals john.clone, like so, and I say Jane dot, well, let's try changing Jane's address, for example. Of course, here is the problem with typing. Notice that Jane is now an object and not really a person, so you would have to at least cast it to a person, and then you can say Jane.address.house number. Maybe she has a different house number, so let's put 321 in here, and we execute this, and now both of them are 321, and this shouldn't surprise you because we made a shallow copy. When we copy the address, we basically simply copy their reference. So there is no specification that says ICloneable is deep copy, and as a result, I mean, sure, you can take it as this approach. You can actually force a deep copy here, and I can do this. I can totally do this. I can put an ICloneable in here. I can implement the missing members here. I can return a new address, and I can copy the street name. Remember, strings are immutable, so we're fine here. I can copy the house number as well, and that would actually work. So if I put it like this, then coming back here, I would say address.clone. Then as soon as I cast it to the appropriate type, everything should be fine. We have 321 here, and we have 123 here. So it looks like I've fixed things somewhat, but still this approach is dangerous. It's not convenient because you're returning object, and it's really not well specified. In actual fact, here is a small demo of what's going on. Like if you take names, which is an array, and you say names.clone, for example, you can clearly see the documentation saying that we're making a shallow copy of the array. So if array is doing shallow copying on its clone, why shouldn't we do anything other than shallow copying? And this kind of tells you that if you want to implement deep copying, which is what's actually required for the prototype pattern, then ICloneable is not the interface that you should be using.